contemplation and action, prayer and action is two sides of one coin. Well, I do believe that. And so I thought, well, what can I say about that? So I thought I'd start in the very beginning when God, who was fully at home with God's self, decided to create. Let's make something out of this chaos. Let's make creation out of this chaos. So, of course, God gets this whole creation thing going, and then in the end, he makes humankind, and he makes humankind in God's own image and likeness, so God can be praised. And so the human being can contemplate God. They walk together in the coolness of the evening. But then after a while, God says, okay, get to work. Here's a garden, now cultivate it and take care of it. So from the very beginning, God decided that it's good for human beings to work. That's almost as important as it is to praise God. So you've got this garden and cultivate it. Then in Deuteronomy, in the Hebrew scriptures, we read, of course, our first duties as human beings is to love the Lord your God with your whole heart and your whole soul, and then love your neighbor as yourself. And not just in word, but in deed. And the Hebrew scriptures are full of the kind of three kinds of people we have to pay attention to besides creation. Take care of the immigrant, the orphan, and the widow. When you're reading the Hebrew scriptures, watch how often those three come together. They might say it a little bit different. They might say the refugee, but the orphan and the widow. So the Hebrew scriptures knew they had to take care of those people because God says in Zechariah, do not oppress the widow or the orphan or the alien or the poor. So the Hebrew scriptures are full of love the Lord your God with your whole heart and your whole soul, but also take care of your brothers and sisters, whether you know them or not. Okay, so the Hebrew scriptures, then along comes Jesus. And we know that Jesus loved the Father, was one with the Father, and he prayed. He'd take time off to go and pray, and he taught us how to pray. But the example that I love is that then he goes out and preaches. He's teaching all this crowd of people, and then he says to the disciples, give them something to eat. So he wasn't just feeding their minds and hearts. He tells the disciples, give them something to eat. Well, they thought that was impossible, and you know what happened with that. But that kind of two sides of one coin, teaching people how to love God, to live right, but then also you have to feed their bodies. When Jesus sent out his disciples at the end of the gospel, he's sending them out to preach the good news, tell them about the reign of God, tell them about God, but heal the sick, take care of the people. So preach and heal, two sides of one coin. And in the early church, the disciples were busy preaching the reign of God, talking about the resurrection, and some people came to the disciples and said, you know, the widows and the orphans are getting neglected. And they said, well, we can't do that. So ordained deacons, and there are 2 deacons in this group. So right away, they said, no, we can't neglect taking care of the widow, but we can't neglect preaching either. So we have to have both. It's not an either or, it's a both and. So the diaconate, the service. So the early church, right from the beginning, knew we have to do both. We have to be people of prayer, be people of meditation, be people of contemplation, but we also have to serve. Well, then I'm going to fast forward to Saint Benedict. And as you know, I think probably, Saint Benedict's, one of the mottos is prayer and work. Again, both sides of one coin. Now, the Benedictine is monastic, so it's not like some orders which were founded to do a very specific work. When I was a young girl, School Sisters of Notre Dame were my teachers. I loved them. They were excellent. In fact, part of my vocation came because the School Sisters of Notre Dame were so nice. But they were founded specifically to teach. There are some communities founded specifically to take care of the sick. Benedict had no specific work when he started the rule, except to pray and work, and pray and in community. So if you read the Holy Rule, the first chapter, you know that there are many kinds of monks, but Benedict said the strongest kind of monks are those who belong to a monastery. They live together in a community, and they serve under rule and an abbot, whatever the abbot tells them to do, or whatever the community might need at the time. Benedict lived in the age of barbarianism. The Huns and the Picts and the terrible Gauls were running, destroying creation, civilization, and burning libraries and places of learning. So Benedict had the monks copying the manuscripts. Benedict had monks copying Bibles and church teaching. Benedict is actually called the patriarch of Western civilization because he believed strongly that learning is so important. And so he believed in education and learning. And that was a lot of the work that the early Benedictines did besides providing for themselves. So there's a part in the rule where Benedict wanted his monks to memorize the Psalms and to do spiritual reading. And if somebody was not able to learn, then they were given manual work to do. When the guests come to the monastery, the abbot or the gatekeeper greets them. And first they sit down and pray, and then they wash the feet of the pilgrim because it was dusty. So again, that combination, you greet somebody in the name of Christ, you say a little prayer, but then immediately you wash their feet. Don't let them feel burned by the dust on their feet. So the combination of welcoming them with a prayer and then washing their feet. Or if you come to the monastery, we welcome you, we invite you to prayer, then we show you the books, we show you how to do it. We don't just let you fumble around. In chapter 57 is a chapter on the artisans of the monastery. So some people came with real special gifts. Poetry, calligraphy, carpentry, maybe somebody who knew how to make sweaters, So artistry, and Benedict encouraged that. But if they're going to sell it, you sell it less than they might get from somebody else. And Benedict warned them, use your skill, but no fraud, no vanity. And if you get too proud over your skill, you ain't going to be able to do it anymore because then it's not used in the right way. But it's in that very chapter on the artisans of the monastery that we have the phrase that in all things God may be glorified. So it's the chapter on the artists of the monastery, those who are using a skill to produce things, that in all things God may be glorified. There's a chapter in the Rule of 35. It's called the Kitchen Servers of the Week. Everybody had to take their turn serving the monks. And but before they would start, and the service would start from Sunday morning until Saturday night, and every Sunday there would be a new group of people who are going to do the cooking, wash the towels, wash the dishes, etc., etc. And they would always, and Benedict says the brothers, sisters, monastic, should serve one another. And Benedict said no one should be excused from that service except if there's a very cogent reason. But everybody takes their turns because that's how we serve each other. And then at the beginning of the week, the servers receive a blessing. And only after they've been blessed do they start doing their cooking or doing the dishes or mopping up the floor. Chapter 48 is the chapter called The Daily Manual Labor. And it's a chapter how they're supposed to work, but over half of the chapter is when they pray, what times they should stop their work and when they should go to prayer. So it's that mixture of the prayer and the work in that one chapter. Benedict can't just stick to what you're supposed to do with the work. He has to bring in the times of prayer at that. And it's in that chapter that Benedict says, the monks should not be distressed if local conditions or their poverty should force them to do the harvesting themselves. Because when they live by the labor of their own hands, as the early monastics and the apostles did, then they are really monks, monastics. It isn't just in being brilliant and smart. That's good. But if you have to labor by the work of your own hands, then you're truly monastic. That's the Apostle Paul didn't have a free life or just expect everybody to take care of himself. He himself also worked. But yet Benedict says, all things are to be done with moderation on account of the faint-hearted. So it's that combination again of respecting human beings as they are, but expecting everybody to pull their weight as much of the weight as they can. So prayer and work. Well, I'm German, so I was just expected to work. I mean, I'm a German. I'm a daughter of a German farmer. And the motto at home when I grew up was, you work first and then you play. So if we dilly-dallied on our work, well, they never got done. They never could play. So I learned to work quick so that I could get some prayer time. Here at St. Benedict's, the work is varied. It depends on the gifts of the people who come. It depends on the needs of the community. So at St. Ben's, we started out as teachers to teach the early German immigrant children. And then they needed there was a tornado, people were sick. And so we started a hospital. We did a lot of teaching, but now we are out of all the schools. Sisters were administrators of the hospital. We're out of that kind of work. We're not the workers, the church workers, which I think, a lot of communities were. We do what needs to be done, but we're more a house, hopefully a place of welcome. So the spirituality center, and almost every Benedictine community has a spirituality center which is a service, to invite people to come in to join with them in prayer, in living the life, giving some chance to be silent, to be quiet, to reflect. So every once this will be my last sentence. Every fall we have what we call commissioning day. And we gather in prayer, and then each sister gets a card about yay big, and it has our name and what we are going to do, a kind of work for the year. So my cards and everybody's card had the same thing. The first work that we're all supposed to do is participate in the liturgy of the hours. That's our first work. Come to pray 3 times a day. So we all got that. Well, then it varied. So part of my job work was to work at the Spirituality Center and then to continue to work for peace and justice, however I can do that. And right now, our community is going to, a group of us are going to put on a little workshop session Monday night on how to be involved in the upcoming election. Not partisan. We're not telling anybody how to vote, but we're telling them to vote and to learn the issues. And we have precinct caucuses here, so we're going to invite sisters to write out some resolutions and take them to the precinct caucus. And if anybody wants to be the delegate, they can do that. So education, and to be involved. And a long time ago, before COVID, when the Somali immigrants were first coming to St. Cloud. And so some of the churches were getting together. We're going to say, how can we welcome them? Okay, so I went to one of these meetings to meet some Somalis. And in the end of the meeting, there were two big dishes on them. And one was for the immigrants, mostly Somali, and one was for us Caucasians. And if we wanted to get to know and wanted to have a pen pal, get to know somebody, we could drop our card with our name and our email on it and put it in the card. And then the immigrants, refugees, newcomers could do that. Well, I was there with Sister Balu, and we left before they started to pick out the cards. But the next morning, I got a phone call and said, Nemo Hussein is your partner. So Nemo got my name tag and I got her name tag. And so we met at, I guess we emailed or called her. We met at Walmart, and I didn't know what she was going to look like, and she didn't know what I was going to look like, but it was a little easier for me because I figured she'd have the hijab on. So we had a Coke at Walmart and decided to meet again. Well, it was just so much fun. So I would visit at her house, and her husband was also Somali, and she had I think a 11-year-old daughter at the time. Anyway, we got to know each other quite well. And she came to St. Ben's once, and then she moved to White Bear Lake, or maybe 5 years ago. And after she was there, we kept communication, and her mother died. So another sister and I went to White Bear Lake to her house just to kind of commiserate with her, or I mean, not to commiserate, just to be with her. Well, I got a call from her about 4 days ago. So we're still in touch. And it was and Sunday night, this coming Sunday, I'm going to the Resurrection Lutheran Church here in St. Joe. There's a group called Cultural Bridges, and their whole thing too is to cross the bridges, because we have quite a few Somali people in St. Joe. And so it's going to be a potluck dinner, and I'm taking a dozen deviled eggs, and they're going to have spaghetti for the main. And then we're going to sit around tables and hopefully have a mixture of some maybe Hispanic, some Somalis, some Caucasians, some Catholics, some Lutherans. And I'm going to be a table leader just to those things excite me. Well, balance isn't every day and every hour. We don't get to balance contemplation and action. So I take a month. Well, more often than not, I am at prayers. Sometimes I'm not, because I'm doing an outreach or I'm going to a faith leaders meeting in St. Cloud. But I think so. And there are tensions with that. Tonight, I could have been up in my home. There are 4 of us living together. I could have been up there with a living group celebrating a Friday night. This is a call within a call to be with you all, and it's a good. So you can't measure it out. You kind of go day by day, time by time. Sister Michaela, a former prioress, used to say about showing up at prayers 3 times a day, and then sometimes Eucharist. More often than not, I'm at prayers because that's my first call. Sometimes I'm not going to be there. That's okay. But for my own self, if more often than not, I am doing what was in the Benedictine framework. But it allows me to go. Benedict, there's a rule, a chapter in the rule, monks who are called to leave the monastery for a duty, they can do that. Actually, they get better clothing when they do that, because we don't We don't want to go sloppy outside. But when we come back home, we get that good clothing up and go back to our other stuff. So Benedict expect people to go out. But if they're close enough, they should come home and then go back out. But if they're too far away to come back to prayers, then they should stop and pray where they're at. So it's a both and. And hopefully, if I would get too involved outside, that's what we have community for. Somebody might say, I'm glad you're doing that, but you haven't been around much. Or there are several things I was asked to do I didn't want to do. I was working in the White Earth Indian Reservation, and I loved it because there was something more quiet about the Indian Reservation than there is around here in St. Cloud. We're busy. So and I was happy up there, and there were three of us, all three. The three other two sisters were older than myself. I was the only one that drove a car. We had three different missions, so it was wonderful work. And I was asked to be vocation director. Well, I didn't want to do that. So then I got home, and Reverend Mother asked if I would be considered being vocation director. I said, no, I like what I mean, I'd rather not. I probably said no. I like what I'm doing, and I think we're doing a good job up there. And I said, there must be other people, other sisters who can do that. And she said, well, name me some. So I named some. Well, no, anyway, to make a long story short, I was vocation director for 5 years. I grew to love it. It was fine. I had to say goodbye to the White Earth. So we don't always get to do what we want, and we're not always prepared for what we're doing. But we learn on the job, like parenting. You learn on the job, I suspect. But we do try to get prepared, and but I'm not trying to say we just jump into things. But community, you do what needs to be done. If I can make this maybe a little concrete, I'm a big advocate of GLBTQ plus 2S. I mean, the alphabet keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger all the time. And I think often I wear a pin, so people probably know that. So, but not everybody has to agree with me. That's just who I am. And if you don't happen to like GLBTQI XYZ, that's up to you. I don't have to change you, and you don't have to change me. We can agree to disagree. But I do have a hard time, if people didn't know that about me, and I have a directee that's coming in and they're just so mad at those queer people. I have to take a very deep breath, and I have to count, and I have to say, dear Spirit, this is not about changing anybody. It's listening to them. What's the story underneath their story? Why are they upset? They have their reasons. So it's hard. But I think my bottom premise is I don't have to change anybody except myself. I have to work on myself, my own transformation. But whether in spiritual direction or out of spiritual direction, you're who you are, and I want to respect that, and I want to be hospitable to you and acknowledge you as a beloved creature of God, someone who has value, and that's hard work. It's hard work to put all my biases outside and just be open to you and to let you be in my presence and to honor you. Jesus is probably the only one that could be something to everybody. I've never been called to be somebody for everybody. I don't have that call, and frankly, I don't know if I want it. But so yeah, I'm not the savior of the world, and let us be silent that we may hear the whisper of God. God of word and God of silence. give you thanks for these people that you have called to the work of listening and journeying with others. Bless each one as they are in their particular need. Bless our ministry of spiritual direction as we decrease, so you, God, can increase in the hearts of all who seek. I pray this confident of your love for each one of us. Amen.